Hey everybody, my name's Jaedyn. I'm the campus events vice president for the Eco Reps this year. This means that I'm in charge of organizing and planning and working out different events that promote sustainability on campus, but I'm also in charge of learning about other sustainability events on campus and making sure that, the details are communicated to our members so that if they so wish, they can participate in those events. The presentation I'm going to be going over today is called Life of a Water Bottle. It's an older presentation of ours and it's really popular, so I hope you all will enjoy it. So at the beginning of all our presentations, we talk about sustainability and the three different aspects of sustainability that people generally think of whenever we bring up this topic, because a lot of people don't see that the decisions of one are dependent on the decisions of others. So social sustainability can talk about anything from human rights issues to workers' fees and compensation, and that can relate to economics and that the amount of money that somebody decides to pay somebody for something, like how much that product is and how well it does on the market, and economics relates to environmental sustainability and that the choices by companies to use a piece of land for their products or to make a product that creates waste, directly affects our environment, and their choice to not mitigate the effects of their products on the world also affects our environmental sustainability. And while environmental sustainability is the most talked about, I think that's because it's easiest for us to physically see. We see air pollution and we see plastic in the ocean and we see plastic and trash lying around all over the place, but we fail to make the connections between the different socioeconomic processes that contribute to this environmental degradation. So I hope you all just learn a little bit about how one cannot happen without the other. So just a little overview on plastics and how they started out in our lives. The first form of man-made plastic was made by a man named Alexander Parks in 1856. He called it Parkinson. It's now known as celluloid. And then a little bit later after that, towards the 20th century, Leo Hendrik Bakelin synthesized what he called bakelite. He coined the term for plastics in 1907, just because it was easier than bakelite, and he is considered the father of the plastics industry, basically, for the world. As plastics became a bigger thing, mid 20th century, world wars were happening, so it was widely used throughout World War I, and after World War II, it basically just became a staple of the world's economies. The invention of other forms of plastic like polyester, silicones, and polyurethane. Plastic itself is made of both crude oil and natural gas that are extracted from earth via fracking and oil rig drilling. It's a synthetic man-made material, meaning that you wouldn't ever naturally find these different organic compounds put together in the real world. They're made of different types of monomers that can be put together. So based upon what different monomers you put, like ethylene or propylene, it'll make a different type of plastic. There is a thing called bioplastics where they will take monomers or polymers that are created by different species of plants and they'll put it together to create a plastic that's more environmentally friendly and that it's biodegradable, or when it does degrade, it doesn't damage the environment. But, these types of things don't get as much media attention and don't have as much research invested in them because there's already a big economic support system in place for crude oil and natural gas and just non-renewable resources that people would rather worry about those than they would about bioplastics. And so this video is just going to explain what I talked about a little bit more in depth and give you a visual.
This is the story of 3 plastic bottles, empty and discarded. Their journeys are about to diverge, with outcomes that impact nothing less than the fate of the planet. But they weren't always this way. To understand where these bottles end up, we must first explore their origins. The heroes of our story were conceived in this oil refinery. The plastic in their bodies was formed by chemically bonding oil and gas molecules together to make monomers. In turn, these monomers were bonded into long polymer chains to make plastic, in the form of millions of pellets. Those were melted at manufacturing plants and reformed in molds to create the resilient material that makes up the triplets' bodies. Machines filled the bottles with sweet, bubbly liquid, and they were then wrapped, shipped, bought, opened, consumed, and unceremoniously discarded. And now here they lie, poised at the edge of the unknown. Bottle 1, like hundreds of millions of tons of his plastic brethren, ends up in a landfill. This huge dump expands each day as more trash comes in and continues to take up space. As plastics sit there being compressed amongst layers of other junk, rainwater flows through the waste and absorbs the water-soluble compounds it contains, and some of those are highly toxic. Together, they create a harmful stew called leachate, which can move into groundwater, soil, and streams, poisoning ecosystems and harming wildlife. It can take Bottle 1 an agonizing 1,000 years to decompose. Bottle 2's journey is stranger, but unfortunately no happier. He floats on a trickle that reaches a stream that flows into a river, and a river that reaches the ocean. After months lost at sea, he's slowly drawn into a massive vortex where trash accumulates, a place known as the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. Here, the ocean's currents have trapped millions of pieces of plastic debris. This is one of 5 plastic-filled gyres in the world's seas, places where the pollutants turn the water into a cloudy plastic soup. Some animals, like seabirds, get entangled in the mess. They and others mistake the brightly colored plastic bits for food. Plastic makes them feel full when they're not, so they starve to death and pass the toxins from the plastic up the food chain. For example, it's eaten by lanternfish. The lanternfish are eaten by squid. The squid are eaten by tuna. And the tuna are eaten by us. And most plastics don't biodegrade, which means they're destined to break down into smaller and smaller pieces called microplastics, which might rotate in the sea eternally. But Bottle 3 is spared the cruel purgatories of his brothers. A truck brings him to a plant where he and his companions are squeezed flat and compressed into a block. Okay, this sounds pretty bad too, but hang in there, it gets better. The blocks are shredded into tiny pieces, which are washed and melted so they become the raw materials that can be used again. As if by magic, Bottle 3 is now ready to be reborn as something completely new. For this bit of plastic with such humble origins, suddenly, the sky is the limit.
Let's escape from that. Sorry, it's a little harder to. There we go. Okay. Having a little bit of a problem with that. So one thing I would like to point out about that video is it talks about recycling in the end, and it's like, oh, recycling is this great thing, which don't get me wrong, recycling is. However, the process by which they break basically plastic down to be recycled, that melting process compromises the integrity of the polymers. And plastic that has been recycled can only be recycled oh so many times before it's not considered usable, and it's not considered up to the standards that we use it for, which means it can be used a couple of times and then after that it just becomes waste. We don't consider it something that we as a society can ever find a use for. So recycling is good, but it only helps oh so much. The most common type of plastic that there is polyethylene terephthalate. I'm pretty sure that's how that's pronounced, or PET. It's also known as polyester, and it's commonly used for textiles, but it's also used for packaging, and it's the principal plastic for water bottles. When they say textiles, they mean like clothing and stuff that's woven with plastic threads. And it's so desired because it's very good at like protecting against moisture, resisting moisture, and it is both flexible and shatterproof, making it very versatile. And then this would be a video that would show you how water bottles are, made, but that video is not on YouTube anymore. So this talks about molding. There's two processes. There's injection molding, which basically means they take a big lump of hot liquefied plastic and then they just kind of compress it, and it's compressed into the shape of a water bottle once it hardens. Or they will use air to push this liquid plastic into a mold and wait for that plastic to dry while it's in the mold. They like to use it for the hollow shape that's used to make the bottle. And then when you're packaging plastic water bottles, they have to be, once they're created, they have to be disinfected, and they're filled with water, and then they're capped. So they use water to clean out the water bottle, and then they put water in the water bottle, or they use water and disinfectant to clean out the water bottle, put water in the water bottle, use more plastic to cap it, then they use more plastic to brand it, and then they use more plastic to package it all together, like you can see in this picture. And then most of this work is done using specialized machines. And so the two forms of recycling that we have are basically where, like they said, they're shredded into small pieces, and then they're sold back to companies who are going to melt it down and turn it into something else. Like, it's a little bit different for me to talk about the difference between the two, because they're very similar, but sorry. So mechanical recycling, they take it and they break it down into smaller pieces, and then they take those smaller pieces and they kind of smush it into something else, and then the feedstock is where they take it and they melt it. And when they do melt plastic down to make it into something else, it is a process called pyrolysis, and it does, have greenhouse gases that it emits. So on a global scale, we talk about pollution of plastics. We focus on water bottles. While approximately half of all water bottles are recycled, there are a lot of water bottles that are created every year, and every year there are more and more. They are the most common type of plastic packaging we find on the world shorelines whenever it washes up in the sea, and they are the most common form of plastic waste that we will find in the ocean, whether that's like a whole water bottle or one that's broken into pieces. So a survey, which I don't know how old the survey is, but it said that 5 companies in the world sell a combined total of just over 2 million tons of plastic bottles each year. And then the top 6 soft drinks in the company in the world would use a combined average of just 6.6 recycled PET globally, which means they are putting out more and more water bottles every year. But the percentage of those water bottles that are made from recycled materials is really small comparatively. They do exclude Coca-Cola because Coca-Cola does not like to talk about what they do. So what you can do when it comes to plastic and water bottles is be mindful of your overall water bottle usage and consider all different alternatives. Now, they have plastic, like hardened plastic reusable water bottles that are more than like the mainstream ones that you would buy at the grocery store, and you carry this one around with you. There are also like the metal ones, like the tumblers that people have. Those don't have a lining, but some people don't like them because sometimes based upon the metal, it can kind of leave a metallic taste in your mouth. And then there's glass ones, which those are like the best overall in my opinion, carrying water and not tampering with the taste, but they're not as easy to carry around because they're more likely to break. Personally, what I choose to think about when it comes to water bottles is making the choice to cut plastics out of my life. Like, I do my best not to buy anything that comes in a plastic bottle, and I try to use my reusable bottles as often as possible. What you don't know about most water bottle companies is that the water that they put in the bottles is purchased from public water treatment facilities. And the water that you're paying for is the same water that you would be paying for from a city that was providing you with water. It's just packaged up into something that's easy to carry around and made into a commodity. So personally, I think it's more, it's cheaper. Like as somebody who doesn't have a lot of money to just use the water that's already provided to me, and then it's just more environmentally sustainable. But if you absolutely must, make sure you rinse your bottle out and it is allowed to dry and you recycle it. And these are our sources for this presentation. So that should be all today. Thank you all so much. I hope you enjoyed this presentation.